My mind, my memories, my life needs some sort of system. My brain is constantly analyzing this is one thing and that is another. A million thoughts in a second, seeking order, needing arrangement. My subconscious sorts through the day's moments, disposing of the trivial, saving the essential. I fit experiences, memories, and people into black and white categories to make sense of it, to keep things simple. Good, bad, black, white, safe, scary, successful, failure, better, worse, us, them, Democrat, Republican, pro-gun, pro-choice, saved, lost, Baptist, Methodist, charismatic, Orthodox, redeemed, doomed, sacred, secular, over and over and over until something doesn't fit. And I am exhausted.
It is exhausting, isn't it? I remember as a young man, still in college, listening to my pastor, Robert Crowley, talk to another pastor about his college and seminary experience. I was working at the church in the summer before my junior year at college, and he let me sit in on a lot of his meetings to get an inside look at the pastorate that I was preparing for. Pastor Crowley, as I will always call him, had gone to Bob Jones University in South Carolina. For those of you for whom that name is unfamiliar, Bob Jones University has always been a very restrictive Christian college formed during the creationist evolutionary controversies of the 1920s. It was known for its support of Jim Crow segregation in the 50s and opposition to the civil rights movement. Fiercely independent Baptist, it looked askance at the looseness of Southern Baptist morals and theology. You heard me. Bob Jones considered Southern Baptists to have loose morals. It also had strict rules about modest clothing, particularly for its female students, and regulated how close a boy and a girl could sit next to each other. I think it was 12 inches. After graduating from Bob Jones, Pastor Crowley went to Eastern Seminary in Philadelphia, an American Baptist seminary in an urban setting north of the Mason-Dixon line, so not Bob Jones, and even worse than Southern Baptist. And I remember Pastor Crowley telling this other pastor that he spent his first year or two at Eastern checking for skeletons in every closet and demons under every rock. Whatever, he had heard that all sorts of bad things were going to happen to him and be taught to him, and so he walked around wondering which one of these professors or students had been sent by Satan to steal his faith and lead him down the road to perdition. I don't know where perdition is, but apparently it's a really bad place, probably in New York. Now, I didn't understand what he meant when he said that to the other pastor, but when I entered my senior year at Baylor and prepared to enter Southern Seminary, which Pastor Crowley had recommended that I attend, I kept hearing warnings about being careful not to lose my faith and how the professors there would try to lead me away from true Southern Baptist doctrine. Luckily, Baylor is not Bob Jones, and those voices were few, and they came mostly from other students who really didn't know any more than I did about such stuff. So I didn't go to Southern worried about demons under rocks and losing my faith or anything. Still, I learned about labels. Conservatives, liberals, fundamentalists, moderates, feminists, Marxists, liberation theologians, higher critics, lower critics, things some people called us and things we called others. I also remember a joke told by Dr. Roy Honeycutt, who was president of the seminary for most of my time there. He said two guys were talking and one said that he was a rancher. Oh, really? Is it a large ranch, he was asked? Yes, he said. Over the years, we've acquired surrounding ranches and incorporated them all into one very large ranch. Oh, said the other guy. Well, what's your ranch called? It's the Double L Circle Y Diamond Creek 5 Dot Big Sky Frog Pond Beaver Dam 4/6's Family Ranch. Whoa, you must have a lot of cattle. No, not really. Not too many survived the branding. Seminary president jokes. Okay, so that really wasn't funny, but it was told less to make you laugh and more to make you think, because more is at stake than just cattle. Sometimes labels are useful. We use them to make sense of a complex world, to let us know when something is familiar and when something is unknown. Like a label on a can or a bottle, labels let us know what's on the inside, as long as we understand that a person is much more complex than a can of beans or a bottle of ketchup. A person is more complex than a computer. No label can ever fully capture the complexity of a child of God, no matter how exhaustive the description. And as long as you understand that, well, labels can be helpful. With any tool, you need to understand what it can do. Perhaps more importantly, you need to understand what it can't do, because it can be dangerous to use a tool without understanding its limits. But labels are most dangerous when they're weaponized. When an accurate description is no longer the goal, rather the goal is dividing people into us's and them's, friends and enemies, those we can trust and those we can't trust, those who are on the side of righteousness and those who seek to destroy the righteous. Weaponized labels minimize the faults and weaknesses of the in-group and magnifies those of the out-group. It amplifies the virtues of the in-group and diminishes or even outright denies the virtues of the out-group. Labels inspire fear and loathing in the in-group, which justifies hatred of the out-group. Pretty soon, the out-group is dehumanized. Their complexity as humans is reduced to a label, which is no longer merely descriptive, and even then was only partially so, but now they're just a label. The label is all there is. The label I was always taught to fear was liberal. I didn't know any liberals, at least I don't think I did, not growing up. If you were a liberal, you weren't allowed to admit it, not in the religious circles I grew up in. The way I was taught, being liberal meant you didn't believe the Bible and barely believed in Jesus, at least not in a saving way, more in the same way that James said that demons believe in Jesus and shudder. Except liberals don't shudder when they believe in Jesus in their self-assured, delusional way. At least I didn't think so. I didn't know any liberals, like I said, or any that would admit to it. If they were closet liberals, I don't know. It's just that nobody I knew was self-assuredly delusional. And pretty much everybody I knew said that they were conservative and wore that like a badge. Sometimes a person who was conservative might have an opinion that was different than the rest of the conservatives, but they always established their conservative credentials before saying it. Now I'm as conservative as the next guy. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that over the years. And see, what they were doing was firmly establishing themselves as part of the in-group, but not in a sheep following, not in a lemming over the cliff kind of way. Part of the group, but still an independent thinker. Because, see, believing is as much about belonging as it is about believing, maybe more. Now, let's be clear. I'm talking about theological and biblical conservatism and liberalism, not political conservatism and liberalism, at least back then. I thought that being a theological and biblical conservative was different than being a political conservative, and being a theological and biblical liberal was different than being a political liberal. Maybe related, like third cousins, but still distinct. That's what I thought. Turns out, though, that there's really no difference. A person who's theologically and biblically conservative is pretty much guaranteed to be politically conservative, and same with theological and biblical liberals and political liberals. They all just seem to go hand in hand like peas and carrots. And I've never been able to figure out if their theological and biblical views shape their political views or the other way around. I mean, everybody will say that the Bible shapes their politics, but I'm not so sure. I mean, who's actually going to admit that their political leanings color the way they read the Bible? I mean, no one, right? But anyway, if a person's theological and biblical views are intertwined with their political views, then I can never speak simply theologically because it won't be heard that way. It'll be heard politically. And people get pretty charged up if you speak politically at church. Well, actually, it's okay if they agree with what you're saying, but if they don't, you're being political and you shouldn't do that. So if the Bible has something to say about slavery or about war or about economics, you can't say it because you'll be getting political and people will get upset. And that's why a good number of preachers in the South stayed quiet about slavery on Sunday mornings prior to the Civil War. I mean, most had no problem with slavery, but those that did couldn't say anything about it. It's like the old preacher boy who came to Louisville, Kentucky from out of state to pastor a church. Early in his pastorate, he preached on the evils of smoking. And afterwards, a kindly old deacon came up to him and said, "Now, preacher, that was a mighty fine sermon, but you need to be careful. About a third of your congregation are tobacco farmers." "Oh, okay, thanks." So the next week, he preached on the evils of drinking. And afterwards, a kindly old deacon came up and said, "Now, preacher, again, that was a mighty fine sermon, but I need to warn you, about a third of your congregation works in the bourbon distilleries." "Oh, okay, well, thanks." And then the next week, the preacher preached on the evils of gambling. And the deacon came up again after the service and said, "Preacher, once again, mighty fine sermon, but about a third of your congregation works at Churchill Downs." So the next week, the preacher preached on the evils of fishing outside the 12-mile limit. Now, that's the end of the joke. But let me tell you the rest of the story. When he got done preaching about the evils of fishing outside the 12-mile limit, even though people shook his hand vigorously on the way out and that kindly old deacon smiled and nodded at him, when that preacher went home that day, he found that something inside of him had died a little bit. But what to do?
Labels simply do not work. Categories are not enough. A person is more than a category, more than a label, a status, a denomination, more than a party or a job, education, pigment. No one person is one thing. No one label defines anyone. Each of us is a beautiful, complicated mixture of all these categories. Maybe that's why it's so important that we renew our minds and choose another way of seeing the world. This crazy paradox that there is no one righteous, but we all have the breath of God in us. That regardless of my labels, her creativity reflects God. His laugh represents God's joy. Her love is a glimpse of our Savior's love for me. God's kingdom is here, with us, in us. May I reject the labels, and may I see the divine image in others.
What happened to me is I met a liberal, a political liberal who was also a theological and a biblical liberal, but that's just it. He was biblical. He took the Bible seriously as anybody I had ever met. And yet what he got out of it was something very different than what I had ever read or heard. It was different, but still biblical. And when he graduated from seminary, he went to South America to bring good news about the kingdom of God to people whose homes were made of mud and thatch, but whose souls still bore the image of God. And one day, he was delivering supplies to a remote village when the helicopter he was in crashed, and he died, leaving behind a wife and 2 small children, and a legacy of faith lived out in a way that I was told liberals couldn't do. They tried to tar him with a label, but it wouldn't stick. It wouldn't stick because it didn't fit, and it didn't fit because his life transcended any label. and so did his death. And what was true of him was true of so many that I met, so-called liberals that had some ideas that didn't fit neatly with liberalism, and conservatives that had some pretty radical views that fell outside of traditional conservatism. And after a while, I began to notice that the only people who fit neatly under a label were the ones who were trying to fit neatly under the label of the group that they belonged to. Because, again, the need to belong is greater than the need to believe, which begs the question, if we just loved and accepted people, all people, so that no one felt like they didn't belong, maybe we could drop the labels altogether. Or at least de-weaponize them so that they can just be the partial descriptors that they were meant to be. And right and left can just be labels that describe which hand we write with. And maybe the fact that our political labels and theological biblical labels overlap so much reveals that we are more conformed to the world than transformed. That our minds need renewing so that we can see the world differently, see people differently. Perhaps the most helpful suggestion in this regard comes from popular author and speaker Brian McLaren, a friend of mine from high school who grew up right around the corner from me. Well, when I say he's a friend from high school, I mean he's 4 years older than me, so technically we were never in high school together. We went to the same high school, just not at the same time. And when I say he grew up right around the corner from me, that's true, although we didn't know each other at the time and didn't actually meet until about 30 years later. And when I call him my friend, what I mean is that we had lunch one time together, and he kind of probably still remembers meeting some guy who pastors a church in Frederick, and he might even remember my name among all the people that he meets each year. But anyway, my good bud Brian suggests that instead of conservatives and liberals or progressives, we see that in each person there is a creative and a preservationist, and a different mix of each in each person. The creative impulse looks at the present and the future while never losing sight of the past, where we've been. They say, hey, listen, we have this faith rooted in the past, but how do we engage our world today, and how do we prepare for the future of humanity by engaging this ancient text? And the preservationist impulse says, look, we have to remember that there's a tradition here that needs to be sustained. It looks at something new and first compares it to what went before, to make sure that it's in keeping with the trajectory set by those who came before us. But even the person with the strongest preservationist impulse has to be creative, because I don't hear too many people reading the Bible and insisting we should live like Iron Age people. And even if they're stuck in the 20th century, the leap from Iron Age text to the 20th century requires a lot of imagination. So the two impulses are not mutually exclusive. They, in fact, need each other. Preservationists have a creative dimension, and creative types have a traditionalist dimension. And theological biblical integrity requires that we embrace this dynamic tension, not deny it, not try to resolve it, but embrace it. Otherwise, the preservationist impulse will try to take us back to someplace we've never actually been, and the creative impulse will veer widely from one theological fad to another. We need both. We need each other. That's the renewing of our minds that Paul was talking about, rejecting the world's either or, us, them, winners, losers mentality, and embracing a both and all of us mentality where no one wins if one person loses. And I'm not talking about participation trophies. I'm talking about doing the hard work of recognizing the humanity and worth of each person and making room for all. And this isn't something new, because this is the biblical witness. And more specifically, this is the ethic of Jesus, who never looked at a woman and saw an adulteress, or at Zacchaeus and saw a tax collector, but looked beyond the labels that others imposed on them, even if they might have been somewhat descriptive, and saw a child of God. Labels may describe, but we must never let them define a person. And don't you let a label define you. We are, each of us, a child of God. We are not opponents nor enemies. We are children of God who see the world differently, see it partially, and experience it incompletely. And by listening to each other, we see more of the world than we can see on our own, and we then enlarge our experience. We learn not to fear differences, but to embrace them. And we learn humility, that none of us see it all or know it all, but together we see more and we know more, and therefore we can love more than we ever can across the divide from one another. This is the will of God for His children, what is good, acceptable, and complete. Father God, you are Father of all, and you do not play favorites. You love those who believe in you and those who don't. And you love those who in their self-righteousness disparage those whose beliefs fall short. You love us all and seek us all, even when we don't seek your righteousness. We need your Spirit to continue to renew our minds so that we can be transformed into the kind of people who seek your kingdom and move easily within it. We cannot move easily in your kingdom if we are conformed to the ways of this age. May we, in humility, submit to the renewing, transforming work begun in us by Jesus and continued by His Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen.